Over the course of the past 8 years, I am someone who's been lucky enough to turn my passion into a full-fledged career. I've worked on thousands of shoes, worked on some incredible projects, met some amazing people, but one facet of sneaker customizing has always truly eluded me, and that is the ability to paint portraits. So I decided that I'm going to practice painting portraits every single day for the next month. Now I've actually done quite a few pairs of sneakers with portraits in the past, but it is absolutely something that I've never felt confident in, and hopefully I can change that. So I always push the idea of getting better at painting portraits off to the side and would say things to myself like, one day maybe I'll take an online course at painting portraits. One day maybe I'll carve out a bunch of time and watch a lot of YouTube videos on how other people do them. But unfortunately, one day isn't a day on the calendar, so I knew I had to carve out a large chunk of time to really practice these. So one of the reasons I really want to add painting portraits into my arsenal is because I always think back to a tattoo show called Ink Master. Every single week there's a new challenge, a new theme, and the weakest artist during that challenge or that theme of the week gets sent home. So you really need to be incredibly diverse at anything that comes your way. Something that judges always say on that show is you need to be able to handle any tattoo that comes into your shop. And I like to try to bring that into the custom sneaker world, and I want to be able to handle anything that comes our way. So my plan of attack is to sign up for some online courses on painting portraits, watch tons of YouTube videos. I'm going to try to research the ways my peers in the custom sneaker world go about doing portraits, and of course just spending a whole lot of hours behind the brush practicing. Before I began any of the learning process or watching any tutorials, I really wanted to get a baseline for where I'm at on day one, so I decided to go ahead and paint an MJ portrait. With The Last Dance currently going on, I thought this would be a great subject, and I'm just using our multi-layer stencil method, essentially, getting some key points from the portrait, such as where his nostrils, his eyes, his chin, his jawline, all those types of things are, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and try and fill it in to the best of my ability. So ultimately, I actually think it turned out pretty okay. It's definitely one of my better portraits. Painting an athlete like Mike in an arena is pretty hard because of all the real strong lighting in an NBA arena. He's somebody that I'm sure if you guys have ever seen images, he played at a very low body fat, so he was extremely sweaty. So there's a whole lot of highlights from all of that going on. I think I started to lose it in trying to blend out some of the areas on his shoulders since he's a pretty muscular dude, and just trying to achieve those blends. I don't think I was able to separate the neck and other things like that. But here's where we're at on day number one. Now that it was time to really get things started, I wanted to make sure that I was going to invest in some nice high quality brushes right off the bat. Even if it was something that was potentially just in my own head, I wanted to try to at least give myself that head start of making sure I was working with a quality product. I also picked up a couple of these smaller canvases. I wanted to make sure that what I was practicing on was not going to be too far off from the size that I'll eventually be painting portraits on sneakers for. So after I went through a couple mini little art courses on Skillshare and Udemy, I shifted into YouTube and watched a ton of videos on there. However, knowing how YouTube works, sometimes really important details get cut out of videos because sometimes you try to keep things really compact and shorten your videos for audience retention times and other things like that. So ultimately, I don't think I was really able to find the perfect series or perfect page to really get incredibly detailed tutorials. However, I did stumble across an artist by the name of Mark Carter through a simple Google search. And he offered this online course, which was 8.5 hours of him painting this portrait right here of his wife. And it's a full start to finish tutorial, incredibly detailed, and he is by far and away one of the best portrait artists in the entire world. He was even commissioned to do this full-size portrait of George W. Bush, and if you take a look at some of his pricing on his website, you know that he's the real deal when it comes to painting portraits, and that's something that I really wanted to do. I really wanted to find an incredible artist and try to learn from somebody who's one of the best in the industry. But for somebody who hasn't been in a classroom setting or a real learning environment for the better part of 8 years, it was not that easy to keep focus on something like this, but I really wanted to make sure that I sat there and I watched, and I watched, and I watched, and I watched. After countless hours of watching his online course and then quite a few of his YouTube videos, I have an entirely new perspective on portraits. And I think one thing that truly stood out to me was trying to understand value and lighting within a subject and just really understanding how different colors look up against different areas. So if we take a look at this model here, we have 5 different dots running across her forehead. All of those dots are the same exact color, but they look very different up against different background or different lighting. So here on the left side of her face, where it's very well lit, that dot looks incredibly dark, but as we move to the darker part of her face where there's shadow, now all of a sudden that dot doesn't look as dark. So just watching him hold his paintbrush up against his reference image a million times and do all those color checks is something that I didn't really know it took to do a great portrait. But really just nailing that value of the color within the subject was far and away the most important part he reiterated over and over. Now, when it came to looking into how some of my peers in the custom sneaker industry go about doing their portraits, I of course had to turn to my buddy Andrew Lewis, who is doing some of the most incredible work on a nightly basis with Langston Galloway and all of the incredible pairs that they've done over the past few seasons. Now, he has a really unique method for how he builds out his stencils for which he lays on the shoes to build his portraits that I stumbled across in this Vice video. And being somebody who works with vinyl stencils on a very regular basis, I thought that there might be a better way out there, such as this method for how to build out a stencil for a portrait. And I also decided to reach out to Andrew himself to see if he could offer up any tips and tricks for me to go along through this process. And the most important thing that he offered up that I think a lot of other artists said online in quite a few videos also is that when it comes to painting portraits, you're going to want to work from dark to light. And don't be afraid to really pack in that dark to achieve the likeness. So after watching and learning from some of the best in the industry, I really felt at an all-time high. I was incredibly excited for my next project. A funny little thing that Mark Carter said is whoever you're going to be painting a portrait of, make sure it's of somebody you like because you're going to be spending a whole lot of time with their reference photo. So for my next portrait, I was ready to go ahead and try to give a shot at painting a picture of my wife, Brittany. Alright, so it has been the better part of 3 days working on this portrait. I even started over a few times and I really didn't want it to come to this point, but I think I just gotta move on to my next subject, my next portrait. Whatever it is, I don't even know from this point, but yeah, I really didn't see getting to this point of just not even being able to complete it. Like I said, it's been 3 days, started over a few times, and I just, after watching all of those hours, I really just thought that, I would be empowered to get through it, even if it took a long time. I don't expect to be incredibly fast at these to start, but, yeah, I think it just worked with too expansive of a palette. I was working with way too many colors, and one thing that I know hurt me was, rather than how Mark Carter will have his reference image printed out right next to where he's painting and he'll hold his paintbrush up to it, I thought I could outdo that and sort of bring technology into it and load the image in something like Procreate, and I was using the color checker in there, so I would constantly check the color digitally and then try to match that color here, and I just know that that hurt me. Rather than just trusting what my eyes actually saw, I was more trusting what the digital software was telling me the color was, but I didn't trust my eye, so I just ended up working with way too many colors, as you can see from some of these images, and I know that's what really hurt me. But yeah, like I said, I really didn't expect to not even be able to complete something at this point. I thought it just might not turn out great, but I just know I have to move on to the next thing and trust my eyes a little bit more. So after failing pretty miserably at my last attempt of painting that portrait of my wife, Brittany, I really didn't even know if we were going to be able to continue on with this video. I didn't know if I was going to be able to continue on with this challenge as a whole, but I really just wanted to move away from human skin flesh tones as a whole, so the next subject that I picked was going to be Heath Ledger as the Joker from The Dark Knight, one of my favorite movies. And there's just a ton going on with him that I thought would be really cool to try to paint. He has this green spray painted hair. He has this white makeup covering his entire face, and then he just has these little creases in his forehead where some of that human skin flesh tone is revealed. He has obviously the red lips and the scars, the black around the eyes, the purple trench coat. There's just a lot going on here that I thought would be really cool to try to replicate. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I had from here is just taking my time with it. Don't rush anything. It's okay that I'm not going to be fast painting portraits when I'm just starting out. I can't expect to be, fast at them at first. And so I really just tried to study the image and just try to really understand every single little crease and fold that happens in his face, and really just zooming in as tight as I can to try to get every little strand of hair lined up essentially, and all of that scarring going on in his face, all of the folds within his neckline and things like that, the folds in the jacket and stuff. So really just taking my time to perfect the image to my liking. And that's where I kind of think you need to somewhat be a little bit of a perfectionist to achieve realism when it comes to painting, and that's not something that I'm particularly used to. So really just taking my time here was the most important thing, and now I think I have a much higher outlook, and I'm really excited about finally testing this on a pair of sneakers. So now this is what this entire month-long experiment comes down to, finally painting a portrait on a pair of Jordan 1s. I'm going to be using Kobe as my reference for a Kobe tribute pair, and I no longer have the comfort of working on a nice flat surface. I'm no longer working on canvas, so now all of a sudden how the paint is going to lay and how it's going to blend is going to be completely different. Now we're working with an image that's going to be stretched across different panels, so there's going to be a whole lot more challenges to trying to paint a portrait on a pair of sneakers, but ultimately what I do is shoes, so I know this is where I need to get the most comfortable with them. I decided to build out my stencil the way that I know how, the way that I've done in the past, using the threshold tool in Photoshop. This gives me a selection of the deepest, darkest blacks of the image, and it really gives me all of the important key points within a portrait. Now, when it came to the actual painting, I think that a lot of people would say that when it comes to painting portraits, you want to start with the hardest parts first, such as the eyes or the nose or the lips, but I really wanted to get a little bit of momentum going. So I decided to begin with his jersey and then move into his arms, work my way up to his neck, and then do his face last. I really wanted to have a lot of momentum heading into that face, really trying to achieve that Mamba look on Kobe. And everything was moving pretty smoothly. It took me nearly a whole day to do his jersey. It took me about 6 hours. And then the following day, it took me 4 hours for each of the arms, so 8 hours total, and then it took me another 4 hours to move onto his neck. I was already 18 hours in before even moving onto his face, and when I finally got to the face, there was a whole new set of challenges of working with a male figure like this who has a little bit of a goatee. He has a real short buzz cut, and these are not easy things to try to simulate with realism. And the image that I picked has that classic Kobe underbite, so there's an emotion portrayed on his face, so there's a lot going on. There's a vein in his forehead. Being in an NBA arena, there's a lot of lighting glistening on his forehead from all of his sweat and things like that. So as I worked on this over the course of 2 weeks, I would literally wake up in the middle of the night and think about all of the blends in Kobe's face and trying to achieve all of this and really make it as realistic as possible. And I really wanted to achieve a 3D look to this. I wanted this to actually look like he's sweating, like there's real lighting going on across his forehead. And it was a real challenge. There was quite a few points where I would take progress pictures of where I was at, bring those into Photoshop and throw the reference image on top and kind of see how they would compare. And believe me, at certain points, I was thinking that I was not going to be able to complete this. I was nowhere near the reference image, but I would just constantly do this. And then I'm thinking back to how I kind of hurt myself using digital technology when it came to painting the portrait of my wife Brittany. So I thought maybe I need to avoid this, but as I would continue to check my progress versus the reference image, it seemed to really help me. It seemed that I could shape the nose a little bit better. It seemed that I could make the eyes seem a little bit darker and other things like that. So I think that using the reference image on top of my progress pictures really did help me in this case. And as we were heading into the home stretch of trying to finish this Kobe portrait, it really seemed like all of those countless hours of watching tutorials, all of that was really paying off. Everything that I had learned, I was really trying to put to the test here. And the image was really starting to come together. It really didn't seem like until, that 11th hour, really trying to capture all of that glistening of all of the sweat on his forehead and things like that. That's when all of this really came together, really trying to capture all of the hairs and the eyebrows and the goatee and things like that. Then we were really starting to achieve that realism type look to the portrait that we were going for. So here we have a final look at the Kobe portrait. We are probably talking about somewhere between 40 to 50 hours into this portrait alone. I worked on this for about 2 weeks, and I know that that's something that I'll definitely have to get a whole lot faster at over time, but it wasn't about speed on this pair. You know, it was really about just practicing the craft and trying to get better at it. And boy, oh boy, this was a fun experiment. I really didn't know if we were going to be able to finish this video. There was quite a few points during this month-long experiment where I thought, I don't want to have to share a failed experiment with you guys. There was quite a few points doing this Kobe portrait, working on things like his nose. That's really hard to achieve a likeness to a nose, where I was like, I don't know if we're going to get through this. I don't know if I'm going to have to switch up the design. I don't know what we're gonna do, but just kept at it, and you know, that's something that's gonna happen when you're trying to learn a new craft. It's not gonna be completely linear. So hopefully I'll be able to use this as a stepping stone in my career, and I'll have a whole new outlook on portraits, and I know that there's a whole lot more room for growth for me to get a lot better at them in the future. So overall, it was an absolute whirlwind of a month. It was essentially like a roller coaster filled with tons and ups and downs, but ultimately the payoff, I truly couldn't be more excited with how awesome I think this Kobe pair turned out. I think it was a really unique experience for me to essentially put myself on the other side of the camera, put my feet actually in your shoes as a viewer of somebody who teaches a craft, and now I have a whole new perspective on how hard it really is to try to learn a new craft. And I think one thing that I could truly take away from this is that I want to continue to try to be a better teacher here on YouTube, and all those little ins and outs, really explain things in depth and detail, because there's people who are viewing a craft for the first time that really don't have any point of reference. They don't know how to do something. So hopefully we can continue to push you guys. And hey, if we can make this much improvement in a matter of a month, we know that you guys can do it too. So hopefully you guys feel like any challenge that you want to put yourself up to after watching us go through something like this, you can do it. You just have to set your mind to it and just say, I'm just gonna do it. And it's not gonna be easier. It's not a linear path. As much as I thought it would be, I really thought, here's gonna be me on day 1, and here's gonna be on day 30, and it's gonna be a completely linear path. I'm gonna get better every single day. It's not like that. It's like a roller coaster. There's so many ups and downs. So it was a really fun experience though. I really look forward to doing more of these and putting myself through more challenges. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully you truly enjoyed it. Go ahead and give it a like. Make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you guys in that next video.